like to introduce Mr. Jeff Weiss.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks, everybody. So I guess I'm here a little bit for the comic relief. It's the middle of the afternoon, and we're going to talk about my favorite subject. Since I'm here, I'll talk all about me. So my favorite subject is money. Now, who knows where the money comes from? We're in Washington, D.C. Many people think it comes from the Capitol. Well, Congress is fresh out. I'm sorry. Many people think it comes from the utilities. Well, the utilities struggle to pay for things, and they have a business model where they're resilient. They're resistant to adding cost and adding structure. So there's a fabulous place where money grows on trees, and it's called Wall Street. And they have so much money there, you just have to know their rules, and you have to know how to go about it. Structurally, we're going to talk for a little bit about solar and about microgrids. So as we've been talking about EMP and threat protection, one approach is to have resilient microgrids. And of course, resilient microgrids can be at the level of a hospital, at the level of a community, at the level of a piece of critical infrastructure. But of course, they have to be funded. So that's where the key comes in. The interesting thing about the world today is there's a nice analog, which is what's happened in the solar industry, the distributed solar industry. So that's really where I'm going to lead and what I'm going to spend some time talking about to explain money, to explain risk, to explain finance, to explain how to extract money and how to fund all this. From an EMP point of view, though, I wanted to level set and to say that, interestingly, almost every microgrid that gets deployed or that is talked about being deployed includes solar as one of the constituent parts. So a microgrid simply is a grid that's small instead of big. That's what the word micro means. It's usually contained. It's for a facility. It's for a community. It's for a smaller area. It could be for a military installation. It has two or more. It always has two or more forms of power. So a generator on your facility is not a microgrid. A generator is a generator, but a generator is part of a microgrid. It's one of the constituent parts. There's always two or more forms of power. Microgrids always have smart grid technology, quite simply because if you've got multiple forms of power coming in, you want to have a way to control it and to push it back and forth. Microgrids always want to have a black start capability. So again, coming back to EMP and the threats we're talking about, you want to have the ability to turn it on when other things go off. And of course, then after that, there are other forms of requirements that really depend on the need or the locality. The big and expensive one that's quite often talked about and added is cybersecurity. So, of course, the power can come from solar, it can come from CHP, it can come from fuel cells, it can come from hydropower, wind, geothermal. The lovely thing about power is you just have to look at the location you're in and determine what's available. But you always want to have at least one, if not two or three, renewable forms of power, because quite obviously whether you're talking about something that results from an EMP or just a long-term grid outage, if there's no infrastructure to get something from point A to point B, you need to be able to generate it right in situ. So I've got some fun words up here: avoid, reduce, accept, or transfer risk. So the interesting thing about microgrids and the interesting thing about solar, to be a bit more specific, because solar is, as an industry, way ahead in the development of itself from an industry structure point of view from microgrids, which are much earlier stage. They're less defined. Solar is kind of a widget, and it's getting deployed very, very broadly now. Is that what most people know is that the hard costs of solar have come way down. So 95% of all solar in the United States has been deployed since 2008. A big part of the reason is that before then it cost $5 to $10 a watt to deploy solar. Now it costs $1.50 to $2 a watt. So those are called the hard costs, and the biggest elements of those are the panels, it's the inverters, it's the electric costs, it's the labor, it's the stuff that's fairly tangible and easy to see. What's behind the curtain, and the really hard problem, which I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about, are soft costs. So soft costs are that which you don't actually directly buy, but everyone pays for it. So soft costs are everything to do with the cost of capital, the cost of unforeseen risks, the cost to close a transaction, the cost to market and attract everything you have to do to assemble all the parts and all the constituent customer parts. So soft costs are very high, and until this morning, I just would have told you that they're high, and you would have had to agree with me. But now I can point you to an NREL study that's just come out, and the National Renewable Energy Labs have done it, have produced a 75-page document that documents soft costs, and they've now documented that it's the last frontier, and it's the most important problem to solve. So from an engineering point of view, what that means is we've gotten all the hard costs into a zone where they're pretty understandable and they're now cost effective. But we have not done that with soft costs, which is why it's now Wall Street's turn. So soft costs ultimately have to do with cost of capital. So if I go to my friend Bill over here and I say, Bill, have I got a deal for you? Here's 20 projects that I think are right up your alley. Would you please invest in them? You say, sure, I like you, Jeff. You seem to be a good guy. I'll look at them. I'll go to my partners at JP Morgan, and I'll have their analysts look at them, and we'll get back to you in a month or two. And that's a reasonably normal banking-like business process. The problem is, in the world of solar, which is very far advanced, and then certainly in the world of microgrids, which is much less advanced from a unit price package structure point of view, the problem is that the diligence process that's undertaken at the institutional investor level is very opaque, is different for all of them. JP Morgan does it differently than Morgan Stanley, does it different than General Electric, and you can go down from there. So there isn't a standard process. No one asks the same questions, and therefore the cost of interacting, of completing the diligence, and of knowing what you're doing is actually extremely high. And that opaque process and high cost is causing the preponderance of projects that get initiated to fail. So in the country, 95% of projects that are initiated fail. It doesn't mean they fail from an electricity generation point of view. It means they fail from the time someone thinks about them to they don't get money. They don't actually get built or deployed. So how in a more business-like structure does one get around this? You do it with standards. So again, going back to my bringing Bill these 20 projects, Bill would be better off if instead of just my saying to him with a smile on my face, here are 20 excellent projects, I think you like them, don't you, and let him nod his head. It would be better for Bill and for his friends at JP Morgan if he was viewing them in a standard process. If he was viewing it in an industry that had a standard structure so he knew exactly what it meant, and if those standards were driven by industry, because industry is what matters, and that there was a credible path to broad adoption. And in that example, and that's what I'm going to talk about, this is an introduction to True Solar. True Solar in the solar world is the standard process that industry is developing and my firm is leading to create an approach to diligence and risk mitigation which is replicable and broadly adopted. And it's absolutely almost cookie cutter applicable beyond solar to each individual form of renewable energy as well as to microgrids, which is our business intention. There we go. So standards, it's interesting that we've asked a lot of people about this. 83% of developers, people that are out there in the solar world, say that their business models are misaligned to financing terms and to pricing. Well, that's uncomfortable. Who likes to start on something where you feel that 83% of the people who are giving you money don't even speak your language or don't understand what you're doing, right? 90% of originaries report more than 50% deal dropout. Well, talk about a high cost. The cost of that which you start to work on and just work and send your people out and maybe spend some money on that they don't even get done, that's a very, very high cost. So we need an IT-enabled deal flow to help structure this and make it a transparent and fluid process. This system we're working on is driven by industry. We had the good fortune in starting it to have Standard & Poor's and DuPont as our first partners, ABB as a partner, Booz Allen, I can go on. They're all publicly listed, but we've got 7 publicly traded companies, $100 billion of revenue among them, and another dozen private companies, many of whom are significant all of whom are significant in the in the value chain. They represent some of the largest manufacturers and the largest service companies and largest insurers. I'll give you one example of where this is going from insurance. From a cost point of view, the largest single expense if you own and operate a solar facility after you commission it is property and casualty insurance. Why? It's because this is still a adolescent cottage industry. So in America, you think microgrids are early stage, solar's less early stage, but still adolescent. As an adolescent industry, you go to the property and casualty industry, as we have comprehensively, and you say, well, why do you charge so much for property and casualty insurance? They say, well, we don't have enough data. We don't have enough experience with losses because there haven't been enough around for enough decades. So what they do is that it's not that they make it up, they charge enough to be sure that they're protected and covered. So when you go to the insurance industry and say, well, we're about to have a rated process where instead of giving Chuck a portfolio of more generic projects, you now have a portfolio of rated projects, kind of like a FICO score for solar. They say, well, golly, we're going to charge less for property and casualty, and we'll have a true solar rated property and casualty product. So that will come out in the next year. I guess I've talked a little bit about this. That's an example of adoption. The way this is going to be adopted is this process, and most people probably know the word FICO score from consumer finance. This is a commercial industrial analog to that, and it's more complicated, but it's not unlike a FICO score for commercial industrial solar projects. Publishing it will be complex, but published. So it'll be like putting the tax code online. We can all go online and we can pay our taxes by downloading forms at irs.gov and the rules and pay them legally. Or we can also go to software like TurboTax and choose to use a forms-driven process. Both will exist in the near future. So where is this leading? And these points, I believe, are totally analogous to the entire conversation for the last day today. And this is the non-technology comic relief part of the afternoon. But this is all about lowering the cost of capital. So money costs a lot of money. So in the world of commercial industrial solar projects, the number right now is 9%. Now that doesn't necessarily mean anything out of school, but to get a Wall Street investor to invest in Bill's project for his solar project, he needs to show them that he can give them a yield which is 9% after tax unlevered. Well, I will tell you that in the world of things which are basically bond-like returns, 9% is a pretty high interest rate. It's a very high interest rate. Why is it such a high interest rate? Because it's still a cottage industry and because there isn't true solar and there isn't a rating system. So the thought is, when we say lower the cost of capital, Bill also used the word log scale before in showing his graphs. If we as industry get the cost of capital to go from 9% to 8%, that's logarithmic growth in the number of solar projects and therefore the number of microgrid projects which will be invested in America. If we get it from 8 to 7%, it just goes beyond. So this is actually very exciting. And the final bullet down there is it enables securitization. So the holy grail on Wall Street, the place where the money grows on trees, is securitization. So Wall Street loves to invest hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars in new things. That's how the mortgage markets took off. That's how the derivatives markets take off. There's goodness on Wall Street, and there's trillions of dollars to finance anything, including microgrids and commercial industrial solar, when they can sell securities. They can only sell securities if they can underwrite the securities, right? Because that's what the SEC is for. There are laws that say you cannot sell security unless there's an underwriting standard. So this is all being set up to allow securities. Now let me give you some data, because 2013 is the first year in history that there have been securities sold in renewable energy. This is very exciting. So I've been around this for a number of years now, and everyone's been saying, well, this will all be good when we have securities sold. When Wall Street, those guys up in New York, sell securities, but there haven't been any. So finally now there are. So Solar City, which is one of the most successful solar companies, period, residential solar, sold a bond 3 weeks ago. The bond is a $54.5 million bond. They got Standard & Poor's to rate it. It's a BBB+ rating. And the yield that came out on their bond is 4.8%. Well, that's a lot less than 9%, so we're very happy about that. NRG, the large utility, sold a bond company, which is called a yield co, which went public last summer on the New York Stock Exchange. They put $2.2 billion of assets into it. When it went public at $23 a share, it was yielding 4.5%. It's gone up to $37, so it's now yielding 2.7%. Again, yay, 2.7% is a lot less. I have one more thing I want to do. I know we're out of time. Would you please run the video? This is going to give you just a quick, hopefully mid-afternoon bit of humor about where True Solar is going, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hi, I'm Solar Finance.
And I'm a solar developer.
Hey, little brother. How'd you do on your True Solar test today?
Okay.
Martin, what did you get on that test?
5 and,
A what?
590.
Sweetie, I thought solar was your favorite subject.
Mr. Finance said I got the completion risk wrong.
Martin, we studied that together.
And I forgot my consent for assignment.
At least you got the termination schedule right. Didn't you?
I didn't do. And my site lease wasn't concurrent to the PPA.
Martin, you know you have to pass True Solar if you're going to graduate to Solar Finance.
Great, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Jeff. And as the next panel comes up, do we have a question from the audience? Do I have a question for Jeff before we go? We're only running a minute or so behind. You have a question. Identify yourself and ask the question.
I'm Terry Hill with the Passive House Institute. How about a city block of very energy efficient houses, all with solar and a microgrid? Could we finance that?
Great idea. The answer is anything is financeable if one understands the contracts and the risk. So they need to be, and it needs to have, in today's market, over a 9% after-tax unlevered yield.
So the answer is of course, and we're ready to do one almost right away with a little bit of homework, right? Okay. Someone else with a question? One more. We have, if it's fast. Okay. Now, thank you very much again, Jeff.